In this video, we're going to continue on with VisualView. We've created points, we have a driver, which is a port, and we've also got an existing project, which is called Project 1. You'll notice we're still logged in. We haven't logged out of the project. At this point, I'm going to be following the handout that comes with the labs we do when I teach classes on learning how VisualView works. This is part of my lab manual. If you'd like a copy of that, I'll put a little section down below where you can reach out to me and I could send you the lab manual if you wanted to work towards different labs. It's going to go through a lot of the things we're going to touch on this video. So the next thing we're going to have to do, we're going to have to go up to configuration and we're going to go to what's called the graphics. Click on that and that opens up the screen section over here on the left. I'll move this back down and I'm going to click the new button and it's asking me a name for this. We're going to go ahead and type manual mode. I'll click OK and it opens up a default screen. Now if I wanted to go in and change the background, I can go up here to the top section and you'll see up here under Windows you have different settings. So the background, the settings for this. So if I go down here to background and go into fill settings, you can see if I want to change the background color, I can edit that. So I'm going to pick a gray color for that. Click OK. You notice it didn't change that, so I got to go back in there, go back to background, fill settings, and I'm also going to change the foreground color. That's going to be the color that's here. So foreground, pick the same one as gray, click OK, and now that's going to be the background color for my particular screen. If I want to go in and change the size of it, go back up here to Window, go down here to Settings, and you can see in here where it talks about the window settings. If I want to put a title on it, we'll just type in here manual. Let me go back and change that. Manual mode screen. If I don't want it to be quite this big, I could get out and change the settings. And let's change this to match the manual, which is going to put in here 600 and the height will be 400. And there's nothing else in there. We could go ahead and say everything looks good. If I want to change any of the other things, and we'll go through some of these other settings in further videos. So I'll click OK. It's going to shrink the size of my screen a little bit. And the reason I do that, I'll run these screens fairly small so that when I run them and I'm watching the logic in the PLC, I can kind of control things with my HMI screen in the front, but I can see the logic behind it because I'm going to make a pretty small HMI window to use. Okay, so we've got this screen, and you'll notice over on the left, what we call these are basically screen objects, or the objects we can use in our project. So the first thing that the lab tells us to do is, once we've got that, it's also telling us to create the points here, which I don't have to do because I've got those all in there. So let me scroll through that. I've already got all of these. So it's going to tell me next, once I've got those, to put some buttons in. So I'm going to go over here and get what's called a text object. This guy right here. I'm going to click on that, drag it over here and drop it. It pops up a text edit window. Let me move this down a little bit. And we're going to type in that pump 1. Okay. Now, while I've got that open, you can see that it tells me what's going to show up. So I click that in there and put it in there. Now, do I want to change the font to that? Because I can do that. So up here, you'll notice on this, I can change the font and type. Come up here and check, say, Arial. And maybe I want to make it a little bigger. And would I like to center it? So I'll just center it here. So I can use that to center that using these guys up here. So what I've done is change this and this. Now, over here you can see my background color is white. It shows right here BG. Foreground color is blue. That's what you see in there. So we're going to change these because we'd like them to show up with a black background and a yellow color for the pump. So over here on the foreground, I'll click that. I'll click the yellow color that pops up, and then I'll click the background, change that to black, and now it shows pump 1. Now I can click on these little arrow boxes over here and make this smaller, wider, narrower, and then I can also take this bottom one here, click on it, hold the mouse and drag it down. So all I'm creating here is a general description or text box, and then underneath it I will put the buttons in here. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to go get a button. So back over here where we got the text object, we'll come down here and you'll see what we have, button. Click on that, drag it over here, click anywhere, and it pops up over here all the different type of objects that we can make out of that button type. Now we're just going to leave it at button. It's going to look like this guy down here. If I click on the other ones, it gives me a little preview down here. You can see some of the different types of objects that we can use. So we're just using a generic button. So we'll click OK. Puts my button down here. It's not sized the way I want. It doesn't quite look the way I want, but I can move some things around a little bit, change the color of it. And what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to make this guy to where he looks a little different. So if I right click on here and go to edit, this is my button configuration editor. I like to center these down. The caption, okay, this is where we're going to go in there and type in start. And we'll use all capital letters. Do I want it to have a raised, sunken, empty? I leave all that alone. Now it says start. Now I'd like my background on this to be green. So background, change it to a lime green color. The start text, I want that to be black. So I'm going to come back up here to the foreground, click on that, click black. Okay, now it shows start, and it's sized at a decent shape for this. So let's take this guy and slide him up in here into below our pump text, and we're going to have him basically right below the description for pump 1. Now once I've clicked on it, if I want to arrow up, arrow down, I can move this in small increments if I'd like to. The other thing I can do is go up here to the window grid and change this grid to different settings if I want to move it in smaller increments, larger increments, and so forth. Now, we've got the start button on there. The next thing we have to do is we have to go into what's called the editor. So I'm just going to double click the start button, and it opens up my analog dialog editor. And what we want to do is we want to set this start button up so that we click on it with our mouse, or if we have a touch screen, we can use the touch screen. We wanted to initiate or write a 1 to a tag inside of our PLC. So what we're looking for is called on mouse up, this guy right here. Okay, we're going to come over here and click the enabled. That's going to pop up then the mouse command screen. And we're going to come over here where it says new, and we're going to look for pulse boolean. So we'll click on pulse boolean, select OK. That's going to put it over here in the mouse commands section. Over here at the tag name, we're going to select the tag we're going to use. Now remember, this is pump 1. So start pump 1, we'll select that. We'll click OK. We'll leave this at true, and we will change the time delay to 1 second. We'll click OK. And now we have that event enabled. We'll click OK again and close that. So now we have the start button set up. Now we're going to also need a stop push button. So we're going to take this button and copy it. So copy, paste, and I'll just move that down below the start button. And I will go up here and change the background now while it's highlighted. So I'm going to change the background color to red. And I'm going to right click on this, select edit, and I'm going to go in there and call this the stop button. So I'll just backspace and change this to stop. Click OK, and now we've got the start and the stop. Now I have to go back in here, double click it. It's already got the on mouse up event enabled. but we're going to have to modify that. So we're going to click Edit, Pulse Boolean. We're going to be our stop pump 1 HMI. So we'll go in there and collect stop pump 1 HMI. And we're going to set this initial value to be false. So we'll go in here and change this to false. Leave the time delay, click OK again, and now we've got that. So the next thing we need is some kind of indicator on our HMI. So when we press the start button, we will get some kind of acknowledgement here on our HMI that that's happening. So we're going to go back in and get another text object. I'll just put this over here anywhere for now. Comes up with a red background by default on this. So I'm going to go in here and type in stopped, all caps. Font size is already fairly sized for what we're doing here. And what we want to do is we'll just slide this over here above our start button. And we'll just kind of modify it so it's about the same width as this is. Now remember, I can arrow over slightly with my arrow buttons on my mouse, go up and down. So about there looks good. Everything else is fairly well centered. We can always go back and clean that up. Now we're going to double click the stop text. That's going to give us our animation dialog. And what we want to have happen is when we press the start button, number one, we'd like the background changed to color. So we're going to go to brush event, enable that. Pick our source, and this is going to be pump 1 indicator on. So that's that one right there that came up. We're just going to click OK. And we're going to tell it we want the background color to change to green or lime color. And our foreground color, we're going to make that black. That's going to basically be our text. Okay, so that sets that up. The other thing we want to also do is we want to change the text that's in there. So we're going to scroll down here until we see text string. We'll enable that. We're going to go in and get the same variable bit. So pump 1 indicator on. Click OK. And in this box right here, when it's true, we'd like the text to show up saying running. So I'll type that in there, click OK, and that's finished for that one. Now, click OK. That looks pretty good. One other thing I want to make sure when I go to test this to run it, I want to make sure that this small window I'm creating comes up automatically. So I'm going to go up here to Edit, and this is not where I want to be, so let's go ahead and save this. And we'll close the windows. And I'm going to go back over here to the main Visual View and go to Edit, Configuration, Settings. And this gives us all the settings for like the program when it starts up. Now I've already come in here and set this to right here. Home screen is manual mode. So that's going to start up when we start the application. So click OK. I can close this. So I'm basically to the point where I'm ready to try this. Ready to try running this. Now I've already got my connected component workbench running. Here's a small program I've put in the connected components software into my little 18 or 820 trainer. So I'm just going to go back to Visual View, start it up, and by doing that I'm going to click Monitoring, Start. Any changes I want to save? Yes, might as well. It brings up our Visual View kind of background monitor. I'll move him down here a little out of the way, bring this down here so I can move this screen wherever I want on here. Now, you can see here in the software these are all XIC instructions. You might say, well, that's a stop button. I'd like it to be true. Well, it is. And let's see what happens when I push the stop button over here for pump 1. You can see it goes false, goes back true. And that happens because of the way we set up the button. Now, I'm going to click Start here. And if things work correctly, my LED on my trainer turned on. You can see here that the output turned on back here, IO-EMDO output 0. So when I push the start button, pump 1 start PB went true, turned on the output, and keeps it on with our little branch circuit. Now if I press stop again, shuts it back off. You can see this goes back to saying it's stopped and seems to work correctly. Now I'm seeing a little bit of my text down here is cutting the box off, I think slightly, but those are all things that we can clean up when we are kind of reworking with this. Now my goal on this one is to have all 3 pumps with a start stop for each one, but I think what I'll do is I'll stop the video for now and we'll say this is good enough, and then we'll continue on in our next one. We'll put the other 2 pumps on here and then we'll continue on with another lab.